We need to let everybody know, Don, that you are a huge advocate for the J6ers. You've devoted some of your valuable time to defending them. I don't know if you want to go into any of the cases, but I'd love to get your take on what you think might happen. What's your gut telling you with regard to the potential for pardons for these J6ers by President Trump?
Now, so what's going to happen? Clearly, the president is going to pull out his pardon pen, and I'm hoping that he's going to do a sweeping pardon. Listen, here's the thing about it: we got Americans who still are in the gulag, as we call it, in D.C. haven't even gone to trial yet. 4 years have passed. Nobody lost their life at J6 other than Ashley Babbitt, who was one of us. Even if you have an assault or whatever may have happened, if you've been locked up for 4 years, that's more than enough penance. It's time to call this out for what it is. As you all mentioned, and as you know, I've represented a couple of guys. One that I was actually in front of Judge Chutkan with, a young man who was only 20, whose only crime was walking into the Capitol, walking out with a red hat on his head. And of course, I was awakened at 6 in the morning on the morning of March 21st, 2021 by the young man's father saying, "Don, I've got 12 FBI counterterrorism agents ransacking my house." I threw on my suit, went down to the federal court in Columbia, South Carolina. I saw the U.S. attorney, said, "What's going on?" He showed me the charge sheet, 5 misdemeanor charges, warrants 12 FBI counterterrorism agents. So the book, which you were kind enough to mention, Kangaroo Court, which is right here, I've got a chapter in here entitled J6 versus George Floyd. In other words, so we're looking at the treatment, the prosecutorial treatment of the J6 defendants versus George Floyd defendants. George Floyd riots were the costliest and among the most deadly riots in the history of the nation. Over $2 billion in damage. 95% of the George Floyd arrests were dismissed by Democrat prosecutors. And I say Democrat prosecutors because most of these riots took place in big blue cities. By absolute contrast, 95% of the J6 arrests are being prosecuted. So it's diametrically opposite. This is a political prosecution. The whole thing is politically motivated. It's politically motivated by the federal government to try to punish people for supporting a certain point of view, for punishing people for their association with President Trump. It's a heavy-handed, jackbooted approach, and I'm hoping the president is going to wipe the whole thing clean. And let's start over. Hey, if you're going to dismiss 95% of the George Floyd protesters, you ought to dismiss at least 95% of the J6 protesters, and even more if you ask me. So we got to start treating people equally. The Constitution requires it. And I didn't mean to step on a soapbox and preach a sermon, but
Hey, that's why we've got you on the show, man. This is soapbox time.